My name is Luke Stockwell, and since the age of 13, I've lived with a sister who has OCD and anorexia. During her battle with mental health, as her brother, I have had little or no support from the NHS, charities or psychologists. I wanted to find out if this was a nationwide problem and if there were other siblings like me who felt forgotten.
It would be so easy to overlook a sibling.
I always felt like I was valued a bit less, and I felt like I had less attention on me.
I think people don't give a lot of thought to what's going on for the siblings.
I think as a sibling you do get a little bit forgotten.
Having lived with my sister who has anorexia and OCD for the past decade, I know how much it can affect a sibling and the sacrifices you have to make. So does Ava. Her older sister Lois was diagnosed with anorexia when Ava was only 11.
It was really, really hard. I mean, I'd try and be out of the house as long as I could. I didn't really like being at home. I didn't really like seeing things the way they were. But it was really difficult to get up and try and live a normal life. I was very, very confused, probably the most. And I'd spend nights where I'd just be very, very scared. And I'd like start shaking because I was so scared of like, why is all this yelling? What's going on? Like, why do I not really know anything?
Did any of the doctors, any of the therapists seeing your sister ever come to you, check you were okay, check see if you needed any help?
No, I don't think I was ever asked.
While spending the day with the family, I took the opportunity to speak to Ava's mum, Zoe, who shared with me what changes she observed in Ava as a result of her sister's illness.
She was quiet. I think she sort of withdrew a bit. She didn't really know what to do, what to say. And she had a couple, I don't know if she would remember, but she did have a moment where she felt she was best not being around anymore, so we could focus our attentions on Lois. That was a particularly dark evening for us because, both children had effectively said, we don't want to live anymore. And that was hard, really hard.
I think it's important that we get help because we are also affected by it. Whether other people believe it or not, we are also really affected by this. It really, really changes you as a person.
So coming out there, I think that was really, really, really emotional. I mean, when Zoe was speaking, she was crying, I was crying, and even you were crying behind the camera. And then when I spoke to Ava, I mean, firstly, that is the first time I've ever spoken to someone who understands my situation. And she was so brave to talk about it, but the feelings that she felt and the way she was so scared just shows why it's so important that this country does more to help siblings. Myself and Ava are not the only two isolated by the lack of support in the UK. In Leeds, Cherie Sims had to face the death of two of her brothers alone. One of those deaths was suicide.
There were no sort of help for me, or there were a little bit for my parents, but not really for me. You just felt a little bit lost, especially as a child, not knowing what had happened and why it had happened. As a 5-year-old, there were literally nothing at all. I think that they thought because I was so young that it didn't really matter. Unfortunately, it really did matter, and there were no help there whatsoever. But I had all my siblings are older than me. My sister and my other two brothers at the time didn't get any help whatsoever, and I think it did lead and play a massive part in my other brother's death.
The scale of the problem in the UK is massive. In 2021, 1 in 6 children were diagnosed with a form of mental illness, which means that theoretically, 1 in 6 siblings grew up with a brother or sister with complex mental needs. As a sibling, you are 70% more likely to develop depression if your brother or sister also has a mental condition. Dr. Hester Bancroft is a psychologist who specialises in siblings of people with mental illnesses and tries to break down the dangerous effects it can have on their lives.
They're given the role when they grow up of being the good one, the helpful one, the strong one, the one that's okay, and they carry that into adulthood. So they will always be the helpful one, the people-pleasing one, the one that's strong. And even in their family of origin, when those individuals are adults, they're still the one that mediates. They still tend to be the ones that sort out issues, that get people talking again, that keep trying to make things okay for the whole family. And that will have a cost to those individuals. There isn't that much, but what research is there shows that siblings have anxieties within them from having had that experience, but they're not often given the space to work through those and to deal with them. And sometimes they're not even aware of the anxieties being there. So they're just operating from a position where everything is okay and they're holding on to everything being okay.
At the date of filming, the NHS website only offers one support group to siblings. And this support group is specifically designed for siblings of those with physical disabilities, not mental illnesses. The NHS were contacted to be part of this documentary, however refused to comment. The lack of support from the top means it's often left to the public to deliver support to siblings, like Tash and Bex, who founded one of the only 3 charities in the UK specifically designed to help siblings of those with mental health issues.
Everybody that comes to the peer support group talks about the lack of support, and in fact they're just there if they're allowed in.
If you've witnessed something that's quite traumatic, if your sibling is in the middle of a crisis, nobody comes to ask you how you are afterwards. It carries on, and your sibling hopefully gets the right care, and it's just kind of left with you.
Now I understood that I was not alone in my experiences, and there was a clear lack of support. I wanted to ask each person what they thought would help siblings in the future.
A therapist in some way, just being able to talk to them.
Acknowledgement and information at the beginning.
Having open dialogue about how difficult it was can be incredibly therapeutic.
So having experienced everything I have in my life and now speaking to all these different people, I think siblings are crying out for someone to speak to and someone to help make sense of their life. And I think we've got to nip it in the bud. So as soon as a child is diagnosed with a mental illness, someone should be designated to the sibling to help them through the process. And that is how we will stop the sibling being forgotten.